Hi guys, Mr. Taylor here. Got the last video for you today in the Language Paper 1 Section A series. So we're looking at question 4 today, question 4 out of 4. Same source as before, same text as before, the boy in the striped pyjamas. So try and have that with you if you can. Right, so as with the previous questions, it's still 3 steps. Step 1, read the question. Step 2, read and highlight. This should really say actually, read... oh, not there actually. It should say read and highlight. Read and highlight the question, read and highlight the source, and then answer the question. So we'll start at the beginning, number 1. Actually, just before we look at the question, I just need to explain to you this word evaluate. All right. So if you evaluate something or someone, you consider them in order to make a judgment about them. For example, how good or bad they are. So let's say, for example, I'll try and draw a bike here. There's like a saddle, and then there's some handlebars, right? And there's the fork where the front tire would go. That's a good bike, isn't it? If you evaluated that bike, you might say that's not a very good bike. It's not going to get me anywhere. It hasn't got a front tire. And you're looking at the thing here, the bike, and you're saying, right, here's a good thing. So we might say, oh, it's got a saddle, and it's got one wheel. Those are 2 positives, but there's a big negative, which is that it's missing a wheel, right? It's missing a wheel, and so therefore overall you would conclude this is not a good bike. So you look at the whole thing, and then you weigh up all of the evidence, and you make a conclusion overall. Is this thing good? Is it bad? And that is what an evaluation is. Okay, so you look at something and you work out good or bad. For this question in the exam, you're not going to say good or bad, but you're still evaluating. You're going to say agree or disagree. So they're going to give you something called a statement, which is just they're going to say something about the text, right? They're going to say something about the text, and you're going to say, yeah, I really agree with that, or you're going to say I completely disagree with it, or you're going to say I kind of agree and kind of disagree. Those are the 3 options you can have. You can say really agree, really disagree, or I somewhat agree, or you can say I somewhat disagree. Okay, so looking at the question, and this is what it looks like. It's always going to look like this. It will say focus this part of your answer on the second half of the source, and it will tell you some line number. So for today, we're going to look at line 33. It says lots of students have written reviews about this novel. One student wrote, I like the way the writer shows the relationship at this point between the boys, how they find themselves in a similar situation but have very different experiences. To what extent do you agree? So you want to say, yeah, I agree, they do seem to have different experiences. Or you want to say, no, I don't, they actually seem quite similar. And then at the bottom, it'll give you some help about what kind of things you could look for. So it says here, write whether you agree or not with the student and what your own impression is of the relationship. Write about what you think the way the writer shows similarities and differences between the boys, so what you think about that thing, and support your opinions with quotations from the text. That's the question. The most important part really is this guy up here, the statement, the thing you're trying to agree or disagree with. And these things down here is just help if you're a little bit stuck and you don't know what to write about. Okay, so let's read the text again then. Remember, we only want to talk about lines 33 onwards. So read this just to remind yourself of the text, because it's been a week since you've read this. So read this page now. Okay, now read this page and remember this is where we're starting from. You can see that's line 35, which means that's 34, 33. So from this point onwards, you can start choosing quotation. So anything that makes the relationship, sorry, not the relation, yeah, anything about the relationship, or anything that makes it seem like they have really different experiences, or anything that makes them seem like they have really similar experiences, highlight that or write it down. Try and choose your own quotations, because in a minute I'm going to show you the ones I've chosen, but it'd be good if you can have a crack at choosing your own first. So read this, choose some quotations. Okay, so here are the quotations I went with. So I've focused primarily in this statement, right? So lots of students have written reviews at the novel. One student said, I like the way the writer shows the relationship at this point between the boys, how they find themselves in a similar situation but have very different experiences. All my quotes about this here, very different experiences. I do think they've got very different experiences. One of them's a Jewish boy who's at a concentration camp, and one of them's the son of a Nazi who is running that concentration camp. Those are 2 very, very different experiences. So I chose these quotations here. You can't have all lived in one room. That's what Bruno says to Shmuel. He's incredulous; he can't believe it, which therefore shows that their experience is very different. He can't even believe that he's telling the truth. That doesn't make any sense. Bruno says the same thing. That's to Shmuel again. Again, he shows they're very different because he can't understand it. Bruno thought he was going to start crying and couldn't understand why. He means Shmuel. Shmuel looks like he's about to start crying, and Bruno doesn't know why he's going to start crying because he can't understand it because he's never been through that. You should have got on it too. This is Bruno talking about the train. He says you should have got on the train with lots of carriages because your one didn't have much room on it. Again, totally oblivious to the fact that Shmuel doesn't have any choice over what he does. And then said Bruno with a sigh. He's getting a bit fed up because he's not able to communicate properly because there's such a different experience. And then finally insisted Shmuel, and this is the one that actually I wrote a paragraph with. So really, you can't write about this one, but you can write about any of these guys up here. Okay, so now I'll show you how to write the actual paragraph. So just a summary. Here's the statement. You've got to work out: do you agree or disagree, and then choose one of these quotes up here to show it. So this is what your answer looks like. You're going to start with an intro, and in the intro, you're going to say whether you agree or you disagree. You're going to say whether you wholeheartedly agree or you somewhat agree or disagree. Then in each paragraph, you're going to do these 3 points. You're going to say what method your quotation is. I'll explain that in a minute. Then you're going to introduce that quotation. Then you're just going to go ahead and explain why that quotation makes you agree or disagree. Okay? And I'll break this down in a minute. Just a quick note. If you do somewhat agree or disagree, then you've got to make sure you have at least one paragraph agreeing and then another paragraph disagreeing. Otherwise, that's not somewhat, that's wholeheartedly. Okay, wholeheartedly just means completely. Right, so let's have a look at the intro then. Just put the statement up here to remind us. We're saying, do they have very different experiences? I said, I wholeheartedly agree with the student's statement, semicolon. It does indeed seem extremely obvious that 2 boys have very different experiences. So all you got to do is you got to say, I wholeheartedly agree, or I wholeheartedly disagree, or I somewhat agree, or I somewhat disagree with the student's statement. Then you put a semicolon and you say why you do, but without using a quotation. Don't use a quotation. If you're going to say somewhat, then after the semicolon, you're going to have to say one reason why you would agree, and then one reason why you would disagree. So you'd have to put both sides. So you might say, I somewhat agree with the student's statement, semicolon. Whilst it does indeed seem that the boys have very different experiences, some of the things that they say are quite similar to each other. So you'd have to put both sides on after the semicolon. You could say, whilst this thing here, comma, this thing here, and then this would be the plus and this would be the minus, or this would be the agree, this would be the disagree. Okay, so that's how you write your introduction. Next, you're going to do mini paragraphs. Okay, you're going to do paragraphs kind of like the question 3, and there's 3 things within each paragraph. And the first thing is, what method is your quotation? And you write that like this. One method the writer uses to statement is method. So our statement here was that their experiences are very different. Okay, so I said one method that the writer uses to show the differences between the 2 boys' experiences, so that's the statement, is their speech. Okay, a method is just a way of achieving something, and so the method, to work out the method, all you do is you look at your quotation and you ask yourself, what is the writer doing here? So going back to all of the quotations we had here, insisted Shmuel, this is speech, right? This is the character saying something, right? It said Bruno with a sigh, that's a description of how he's speaking. So you might write character description or description of speech. If there was a quotation that, I don't know, let's have a little think. Maybe there's a description of a tree or something, then that is description. It might be description. It could be setting. It could be speech. It could be characters' actions. It's anything. It's just what is the writer actually doing here in the quotation that you've chosen. Okay, what are they doing in the quotation you've chosen? So after you've done that, I'll just make that part smaller so you can see the next part. Then you introduce your quote. So I said this is particularly clear when he writes, insisted Shmuel. That's pretty straightforward. You just put quotation. And then the last part, it's hard for me to tell you how to structure this part because you just say in your own words why that makes you agree or disagree with the statement. So my explanation, I looked at insisted Shmuel and I asked myself, okay, why does that make me agree? Why does insisted Shmuel make me think that their experiences is different? So I said, usually when someone insists on something, they're speaking to someone who disagrees with them or cannot understand their point of view. You don't need to insist if someone agrees with you, do you? So it kind of suggests having a bit of an argument. This suggests that the differences between the two boys' experiences is so large that they are unable to see from each other's point of view, and so therefore are disagreeing with each other and having to insist on their points. So I've just explained why that shows that there are differences between their experiences. Okay, so here's my whole response, my whole paragraph on one screen for you to use. What I want you to do is to continue by writing 2 more paragraphs using one of these quotations up here. You can start with next or further on, not further in the text, that's from the last PowerPoint, ignore that. You could do next, or you could do furthermore. Oh god, what's that? Furthermore. Okay. So you can say next, another method the writer uses to show the differences between the boys' experience is, and then whatever method it is, and then just carry on and do the mini paragraphs like that, and do 2 more, send it through to me, and I will give you some feedback through Google Classroom. All right. I hope you're all very well. I look forward to seeing you soon, and let me know if you get stuck. All right, cool. Take care. Bye.